So today, we're excited to host Mayor Ben Walsh for this free monthly focus forum. And he'll be talking about the Syracuse City budget, which went into effect with the new fiscal year on the 1st of July, 2023. The mayor has some opening remarks, I believe some slides as well. And after that, we'll take questions. Many of you submitted questions in advance. We'll try to get to a bunch of those as well, if time permitting, questions posted in the Q&A during this live session. A native of Syracuse, Ben Walsh is the 54th mayor of Syracuse, currently serving in his second term. He's an alumnus of Ithaca College and earned a master's in public administration from the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. He's been involved in a variety of initiatives, both as mayor and before, not the least of which are the creation of the Greater Syracuse Land Bank and the successful redevelopment of the Hotel Syracuse. Ben resides in the city's west side with his wife and their 2 daughters. Mr. Mayor, again, thanks for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Brian. I think I just saw a chat that we just need to let Brooke Schneider in so she can share the slides. You'd think we'd all have this worked out by now, 3 years in, but here we are. So let's see if we can get the slides up, and happy to get started. In the meantime, great to be on with everyone, and thanks for your patience. Looks like Brooke is on.
Cool.
So as we give Brooke a little time, I just saw the presentation come in on my end too, so I can share it if Brooke can't. Just want to give everybody a little context. So it may seem like a while ago that we passed our budget with the Common Council, and it was a few months ago now, but the beginning of our fiscal year actually just started July 1st. So we are right in the beginning of our fiscal year, and thought it was a good opportunity to share with everyone our budget for this fiscal year. So we go from July 1 to the end of June. And so this is our fiscal year 23-24 budget. And it looks like it is coming up now on the screen. And I think we are good. So before we shift from this slide, I just want to pause here for a minute and allow everyone to appreciate this beautiful image. So this was taken by Aid McGuire, who runs Aid Media. Some of you may follow him on Instagram. If you don't, I encourage it. Takes beautiful drone photography of Syracuse. We also happen to grow up on the same dead-end block of Robino Road, which is actually in this view. It's a really special block that we love. We believe we have the longest running block party in the city of Syracuse history. We just marked 50 years. And, for me, part of the significance of the shot and of the location of my State of the City address this last year at Corcoran High School is because these were my stomping grounds growing up. And I feel like I had an opportunity to live a pretty idyllic childhood in the city of Syracuse, which I think, for many folks, they don't necessarily associate the two. But as we position ourselves as a community to grow, and of course with the Micron investment along with many others, we are going to grow to levels we've never seen before. We think it's a good opportunity to remind people all of the amazing assets that we have in the city of Syracuse, and we want to do everything we can to be a city of choice for people that currently call this community home, or those that will call it home as we take advantage of these upcoming opportunities. But the theme of the State of the City, and ultimately the theme of this budget, is next level growth. That's what we refer to it as. Again, we are literally going to the next level, and so we need to make sure that we have a city government and a budget that supports that city government, that positions us for next level growth. So let's jump into some of the budget highlights that I will run through for you quickly. Hopefully the slide deck will keep up. So overall, it's a $310 million budget. And again, the budget accounts for all of our operational funding for the city of Syracuse. There it is right there. So more funding overall for all of our primary departments, some major themes: neighborhood quality of life, schools, public safety, sanitation, having a clean city. So all of that is accounted for within this budget. Another major theme is tax-based growth. So we have seen property values going up in the city. It's led to 4.2% property tax growth, which, as you'll see in an upcoming slide, is an increase over what we saw the previous year. But we're seeing steady growth, which is important because property taxes are our third largest source of revenue. As property values are growing, as we all are painfully aware of, inflation, at least up until recently, was as well. And so that means many of our costs are going up, especially labor costs. And so, we needed to account for that in our budget. We are proposing, in order to do that, we did propose, and ultimately the council approved, a property tax rate increase of 2%. And we're also increasing our water rates to keep up with our major infrastructure needs. So we will go to the next slide and talk a little bit more specifically about some of the city service improvements that are proposed in this budget and being implemented now. Again, enhanced services in a number of different areas, not the least of which is our new uniform covered trash cart program, which, if you are in the 20% of our properties in the city included in phase 1, you are directly benefiting from. The feedback that we've gotten from folks in phase 1 has been overwhelmingly positive. We have had some relatively minor challenges in terms of just change management, helping people understand what they can and can't do, and we are going to great lengths to communicate and engage with our community. But our new covered trash program is the single most important thing that we can do, both to clean up our city, because while I think a lot of us imagine litter as somebody throwing something out the window of their car as they walk out of a store, which does happen, the biggest litter contributor in our city has been our inefficient and ineffective trash collection system. So this is a big step of an improvement in that. And also, it's the most significant thing that we can do to improve the health and safety of our workforce in our sanitation division. So really excited about that. Just a few other highlights from the budget. Some significant changes in the Department of Neighborhood and Business Development. We want to be able to accommodate this next level growth, which means being efficient and effective in our permitting and approval process. So you may have seen recently that we actually changed the nature of our relationship with the Syracuse Onondaga County Planning Agency and with county government overall. Previously, zoning administration and preservation administration was administered through SACPA. It has now been brought back into city government and is being administered through our code enforcement office, which is within our Department of Neighborhood and Business Development. And the idea was to really make sure that we're being as efficient and effective with new development and permitting as possible. And again, that is officially underway as of July 1st. We're hiring up to make sure that we can accommodate the additional demand on the department, but we're excited about what it's going to produce. A few other highlights in our parks. One thing that we heard loud and clear from the community, especially from our young people, is the demand for more night and weekend activities in our parks community centers. So we have included funds in the budget to do that. I mentioned public safety. So we now operate a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week city ambulance service, which we didn't previously do. Ambulatory services, like a lot of other healthcare services, are really in a state of crisis right now. And so in order to make sure that our city residents were getting the services they need, the ambulatory services, we felt it necessary to establish our own ambulance service. That also helps to relieve some of the pressure that our suburban communities with their own ambulance services were having in having to respond to calls in the city. We also made permanent the 24-hour scheduling for our fire department, which has helped operationally as well. Continuing on with some improvements in the budget on the next slide, funding for new classes for the fire department and the police department. I've been mayor for just over 5.5 years, and we are on our 8th police academy class. We've struggled to keep up with retirements in the department. It is at a time when there's less interest nationwide in being a police officer, so that's been a challenge, but we are continuing to fund new classes for both departments. And we've also established a police cadet program to help kind of grow from within, identify young people that are finished with high school, that aren't able to enter into the academy yet, and to provide that bridge, to give them some training and some opportunities and to put them in a position where they can be successful in applying for and ultimately getting through the police academy. I mentioned new fire fire department schedule. We also have a new police schedule contained within the police contract that we recently approved. And we think that that's going to provide for some really unique opportunities to maximize resources, understanding we are understaffed. So we have about 420 staffed sworn police officer positions, but of those, we only have about 380, maybe a few less than that, full, again, despite overlapping police academy classes. So this new schedule we think is going to help us to do more with less, including create some opportunities for some walking beats, which is something we've heard loud and clear the community would like to see. We're already doing more bike patrols. Hopefully you've seen our officers out on their bikes, and also just overall spending time engaging with the community, other than just when people are oftentimes in their worst moments in life. We are going to be opening up a new dog shelter facility in partnership with Onondaga County out at the old Second Chance dog shelter by Jamesville Penitentiary. That's been a significant challenge that we've had. We have a great demand as another impact of the pandemic. More people bought pets and ultimately determined that they couldn't take care of their pets. And so we have more strays out on the streets. So we're expanding our dog shelter capacity. Litter collection as well, something that is near and dear to my heart, keeping our city clean. So we've added more staffing for litter picking, among other things. So another thing I just want to highlight is the city school district's budget. So the district is a dependent district, which means they are part of our overall budget, although they are obviously managed by a school board and a superintendent. But the school district's budget did go up significantly. It includes a $40 million increase in state funding, which we're thrilled about and very appreciative for Governor Hochul and the state legislature's support of that. Again, we think it comes at a really critical time. Within the city budget, we also added an additional $500,000 to assist with improvements in school facilities. The school district gets reimbursed by the state at the rate of 98%. So that $500,000 that we put in through our budget can allow the district to invest up to $25 million in facilities for things like stadium construction, window replacements, roof repairs, and other things to make sure that our kids get the modern facilities that they deserve. So we're going to jump into some revenue components now. So sales tax revenue. I mentioned property taxes are our third largest source of revenue. Sales tax is our #1 top source of revenue. Accounts for about 39% of our revenue. The good news is, as you can see, as evidenced in this chart, it's growing. And that is certainly helpful to the city government, helpful to county government as well. It's also the county's largest source of revenue. So we expect about $119 million in sales tax revenue in fiscal year 24, and that is about 3% higher than what we projected in the previous year. So we obviously want to see that continue to grow. As I mentioned, we do have a growing property tax base as well. So as you can see by the chart there, property values have been going up and at a fairly steady clip in recent years. So that is something that obviously we are pleased about and want to see continue, although it does present some challenges on the real estate market for those that are in the market. But again, overall, from a budgetary standpoint, we want to see property values growing. Certainly also helps continue to build generational wealth as well. So then we'll take a next step and just talk a little bit kind of big picture about the structural gap that exists within city government. So it wasn't long ago where you were hearing discussions about bankruptcy in city government. Thankfully, we are not having those discussions anymore and don't anticipate having them again. But we do still have a structural deficit, which means that our costs continue to outpace our revenues. We've been working at that on a number of fronts, both in terms of being as effective and efficient as we can with our spending, but also identifying new revenue generating opportunities. We have had the benefit of a significant infusion of federal dollars through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, which have helped us in that regard. But really, the primary purpose of ARPA was to mitigate the negative fiscal impact that the pandemic had on city government. And it certainly had a negative impact on us. Prior to the pandemic, we did feel we were on a path towards fiscal sustainability. The pandemic kind of took the bottom out from under us. When you think about shutting down the economy, you are impacting our largest source of revenue in sales tax. So that's helped us to really weather the storm and to help us get back on that path toward fiscal sustainability. And as you can see it in the slide here, our reliance on ARPA funds and fund balance did decrease over last year, and our expectation is it will continue to do so. It really has to if we want to be sustainable. So I mentioned our reliance on ARPA, and the next slide shows again what we've done with ARPA funding. We've obviously made some significant investments in other areas, but we've used the largest share of ARPA funds again to mitigate that negative fiscal impact of the pandemic. So in fiscal year 22, we used $22 million of ARPA funds, and as you can see over the years that reliance has declined. And this year, fiscal year 24 is the last year we will be tapping ARPA funds to offset our structural gap. So that is something we're grateful for, but again, mindful is a one-time shot, something we cannot continue to rely on. We go to the next slide, talk about our fund balance. So again, when you talk about fiscal sustainability, when discussions about bankruptcy, there was real legitimate concerns given our structural gap that our fund balance was going to be depleted. You can see where it was about 50 million when I took office. You can see the impact of the pandemic as you get into 2020, and then the impact of the ARPA funding, as well as some really smart fiscal decisions that I think that the Common Council and the administration can both take credit for, that have led us to a much stronger position. So our current fund balance exceeds 100 million, as you can see here. But in order to make sure that we continue to keep it at a healthy place, we need to decrease our reliance on it, which ultimately means, again, in addition to controlling costs, ideally generate revenues, because we've throughout this process, I have acknowledged that we can't cut our way to prosperity. We have to grow, we have to invest, and that means we have to provide services that, again, accommodate that growth that we're seeing in our community. So going to the next slide, what that means is making some difficult fiscal decisions, and in the case of this last budget, means a property tax rate increase. Not something that we took lightly, but something that ultimately we felt, as property values grow, was the fiscally responsible thing to do to help position us to capture that property value growth going forward. So again, we ultimately, what we proposed and what the council approved was a 2% property tax rate increase. Just to give you some context, you can see it right there for a house assessed at $100,000. That means about a $54 increase in your property tax bill, and you can see what it means for a $200,000 house, about $109. So not an insignificant amount of money, but all things considered, we felt was reasonable, given given the fiscal challenges that we have and our desire to maintain the level of service and enhance the level of services to our constituents as we grow. One thing that you may have seen in the news that's worth noting is that we did have kind of at the last minute a surprise with our property tax revenue. That it was certainly an unpleasant surprise, and one that we expect will never happen again. But ultimately, as we were closing the property tax roll, we input that system data into a state assessment software system that then gives us our information in terms of what we can expect in terms of property tax revenue. Something we never saw before. We put it in the system in the proper way, but when it came back out of the system, really it was one particular property. Unfortunately for St. Joe's Hospital, it was one of their properties. They didn't do anything to deserve it. It was just kind of coincidental. But because of some work that they're doing over there, they did some unique re-subdivisions that seem to have caused a glitch in the system that ultimately caused the system to place that property on the tax roll, which, unfortunately for us, blew a $5.7 million hole in our budget. Again, a very unpleasant surprise, but I want to give credit first and foremost to the Common Council for when we came to them at the last minute after the budget had been approved and shared this information with them. They understood the significance of it, and ultimately, if the council didn't take any action, that gap would have fallen on property on the taxpayers. That would have caused an immediate increase in the property tax rate to make up for that gap. We were in full agreement that the taxpayers did not deserve to have to bear the brunt of that error, and so the council went in, made a last-minute adjustment to the budget that drew an additional $5.7 million out of the fund balance. Again, from a fiscal sustainability perspective, not good, not ideal, but given where we are with the fund balance and given the alternative, it was the right thing to do. And to the council's credit, they did it. And to the community's credit, I think they, while certainly frustrated by the error, understood, accepted it, and ultimately we live to fight another day. So again, just when you think you have everything figured out, you get a surprise like that. But credit to our team, our finance recent finance commissioner who just left us, unfortunately, Brad O'Connor, caught it, and that's why you bring in good people so they can catch things like that. He did, and as he passed the baton to Mike Canizaro, our new finance commissioner, they worked very closely with our assessment office and our budget office to put in some checks to make sure that that regardless of the software technology, that type of error does not happen again. So. Certainly glad we had the right team in there to catch it. So just one more slide before we open it up. I want to make sure I can answer questions. Again, just to give some context for that property tax rate increase. As we often do, we compare ourselves to some of our surrounding communities along the thruway. And as you can see there, we kind of fall in the middle in terms of being our tax rate being above Buffalo's, but slightly below Rochester and Albany. So again, as we considered that increase, we took a lot of things into consideration, but ultimately felt like it was the fiscally responsible thing to do, and certainly appreciative that the council was in agreement. The last point I want to make relative to property tax rates and ultimately revenue generation is this. I mentioned the top source of revenue, sales tax, and the third source, property taxes. In the middle there, the second highest source of revenue is state aid. The acronym is AIM, Aid and Incentives to Municipalities. That is a number at 72 million. While we certainly appreciate, that number has not changed in over a decade. And so when you look at how state costs have gone up, the state budget has gone up, and city costs and the city budget have gone up, the fact that that number has stayed stagnant has had a significant impact on the city's fiscal condition. And even modest improvements, increases to that state AIM number would likely have resulted in us not having a structural deficit at all. And so that is something that every year during the state budget time, we try to engage with the governor's office and the legislature. To the legislature's credit, that they typically do try to increase AIM, but both the previous governor and the current governor up to this point have not been willing to increase that number. Although I've had some good conversations with Governor Hochul. I think she understands our predicament, but she also has her own predicament to work through as well. So we're going to continue to work on that because again, that ultimately without the state, that falls on to taxpayers, because sales tax we can't control, property taxes we can. So I wanted to give that additional perspective, but also show that we're not just resting on our laurels and accepting our fate for what it is. We are constantly looking for new ways to improve our fiscal condition. A couple of years ago, we established a revenue enhancement group to identify new sources of revenue. We're reconstituting that group this year. I challenged them with identifying $20 to $25 million in new annual revenue to help cover that structural deficit. Hopefully over the next 2 years, by the time that I'm done in this position, we will be much closer, if not having gotten there in terms of closing that gap. There are some revenue sources that are already in place that we're waiting to see how they impact us. The recreational cannabis excise tax, as an example, we don't yet have a good sense of how what type of revenue that will generate, but it will generate revenue for us. But looking at other opportunities as well. So that is an ongoing process. With that, I'm going to close and open it up to questions. Again, budgets can be a little boring, but they ultimately have an influence on everything that we do in city government and are a reflection of your values and priorities. So hopefully what I've shared resonates with the folks tuning in. And with the time we have left, again, happy to answer questions on anything that I shared or any other topics. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Ben. I'll start with a question that was submitted by Joseph in advance, which I found delightful. Yes, what's one item on the budget that does not have a particularly high monetary investment, but about which you were very excited?
Good question.
I mean, it seemed to me like you were excited about a lot of those things, right? Some big, small, but I'm curious if there's one little pearl that was, buried in a tiny codicil of the thousands of lines that you said, boy, this is great, even though it's, $5,000 or, 100,000. I don't know.
So, a few things come to mind. I'm a big quality of life person. And so, the little things that when you're walking or driving or biking around the city that you see that bother you, those are, chances are they bother me, and we're working hard to address them. When you look at the city budget, so much of it is taken up by personnel, and rightfully so. A lot of the other things that we do ultimately don't represent a significant portion of our budget, but can have a significant impact on quality of life. I'll go back to the trash. Between the changes that we're making with our trash collection system, combined with continuing to increase the size of our litter picking crew, I feel that by the time this administration is done, we will have done more to improve the visual aesthetics and the cleanliness of the city than any time in recent memory. And that's one of those things that matters first and foremost to residents, but also to visitors, and does have an impact on our ability to attract investment in the community. So something like that, again, maybe not be the most exciting thing to talk about for me, has real tangible positive impacts on the community. I'll keep thinking though.
Makes sense. A few of the questions we got in advance prompted me to kind of summarize a thread that ran through a few of them. This is what, your fifth budget now? Sixth that you
Sixth,
prepared?
I think, yeah.
Curious how your outlook, I mean, it must be just a fire hose of, public service and budget and economics and business and what have you. Curious how your sort of view of the process has changed. And you've also been in two administrations that have spanned tremendous changes both in our country and our community.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride for sure. First and foremost, it for me, every year that we've done it, it's reinforced for me how important it is to have a good team. We have a great fiscal team, starting with senior staff. Frank Kaliva, our chief administrative officer, brought a lot of private sector and nonprofit sector experience to city government. Our previous finance commissioner, Brad O'Connor, and then his really protege, now our current finance commissioner, Mike Canizaro. These guys are pros that could be working anywhere and are choosing to serve their city and city government. Tim Rudd, somebody that was admittedly a thorn in my side for the first couple of years while he was the chair of the finance committee on the council, has come onto our team and has really helped us get to the next level in terms of budgeting. I also like to remind him that he now has a perspective that he didn't have on council, which I think he appreciates as well. But we have a great team. I think, again, coming into it with clear eyes that we did have a structural deficit and that we were going to have to work to solve it. But doing it in a way that, as I said this on the campaign trail, understanding that we can't cut our way to prosperity. The city has been making budget cuts, for decades at this point, and the quality of many of the services have reflected that. So for me, it was a question of how do we invest in city government, but do so in a fiscally responsible way that accounts for generating new revenue and being smarter and more efficient in how we do it, so ultimately we can make it work financially. But again, just when you think you have it figured out, whether it's a pandemic, ARPA funding, or even a software error, there's always surprises. But I do think that when when you take out some of the exceptions and you look at budget year to budget year, we have been on that path towards fiscal sustainability. And I am optimistic and hopeful that we can get there by the end of this administration. And I'm a Maxwell MPA alum, and it ultimately comes back to the Athenian oath and leaving the place better than you found it. And I think we're on track to do that.
Cool. To follow on that, we had quite a few questions about sustainability. You mentioned some other revenue sources, the cannabis, recreational cannabis, and some others. Is there more you could say about, other than the big ones, the property tax, sales tax, et cetera, that you would feel comfortable sharing and that you think might bear fruit?
Yeah, so I think that we're again, that's the purpose of the committee. We're looking at everything from we've seen some surrounding municipalities work with the state legislature to increase room occupancy tax. We know that that's a very delicate balancing act because we don't want to have a negative impact on our local hotels and hospitality industries that have also been through a lot. But that's something that's on the table. We've taken a hard look at our own assets in the form of largely in the form of property, and determining what property we might be able to get back into productive use and on the tax rolls. That provides us with a short-term financial benefit in the form of a cash infusion, but also long-term in the form of generating taxes year over year. So, putting City Hall Commons on the market, and ultimately, we are moving forward with selling that and moving into a new office space. That's another area that we're looking at. But yeah, really nothing's off the table. We want to try to strike the right balance between generating revenue where it's needed and where it's appropriate, but again, not ultimately just piling on the taxpayers.
Gotcha. Thank you. Lisa posted in the live Q&A asking about types of programs that are being looked into for the night and evening youth hours that I think you had in one of your first few slides.
Yeah.
You can share about details there.
Yeah, so really that came from, we're looking at the Corcoran field there. So because I did my State of the City at Corcoran, I and a number of my colleagues, Deputy Mayor Owens, we went to Corcoran and talked with some students leading up to it to kind of find some inspiration from them. And that was one of the things that we heard both at Corcoran, and since then we've gone to every high school and had similar conversations. And what we heard was that for our high school age kids, which in many cases are the most at risk in terms of some of the challenges that we have in our community, don't feel like our parks department provides them with the offerings that are useful to them. Not across the board, but in many cases. When you're in high school, you want to be able to be out at night and be social, but you want to be able to do it in safe places and spaces, and they'd indicated that was an area where they'd love to be able to go into one of our community centers and have an open gym or do something else there. Another thing that came directly from our conversations with students was making sure that the amenities that we have within our facilities align with what their interests are. Perfect example. Over 80% of high school students today, this isn't unique to the city of Syracuse, are involved in some amount of gaming, video games. And so when you think about that, and then you look at our facilities, there are no places right now where kids can go and play video games. And so we committed, and I committed in my State of the City, that we were going to create at least one physical space in one of our parks facilities where we could have a gaming facility. But ideally, I would like to incorporate some level of gaming into all of our facilities, just as another amenity for our kids to take advantage of. So those are some of the ideas that we have, but we're still wide open to suggestions and welcome feedback.
Cool. We had a few questions among those submitted in advance about lead abatement, which I know I think is in large part the county's purview, correct? But curious about what the city does and how it's involved, and forgive me if I'm incorrect on that.
No, it's okay. So it really is a partnership. For years the city and the county kind of competed for the same pot of funding, and were somewhat redundant in the work that they did, and that's no longer the case. We work hand in hand with the county. We both do apply for and receive federal lead funding, and have a process in place where we do have the Common Council a number of years ago, maybe 2019, did pass a lead ordinance, which empowered our code enforcement officers to go out and test for and cite for lead violations. So it's taken us a while to get staffed up and trained up, especially during the pandemic. But our lead program is in full force and effect right now. We are citing lead violations pretty much on a daily basis right now. We then work with the county to tap the funds for remediation, and that's ongoing. So that again, we are fully operational at this point. There's a lot of work still to do. We have some pinch points. Contractors, as an example, at a time when virtually every industry is struggling with capacity. We have found that with contractors that are able to go in and do the abatement work, that there's a greater demand than we currently have capacity for. So we're trying to make investments to build that capacity within our contracting community as well. But it is a priority of this administration. It's one we've made great strides on, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Got it. Thank you. I guess a similar sort of follow-on question. Dennis posts in the Q&A asking when construction might start for the STEAM school, a forum topic we had here at Focus some months ago. Curious about what you know about that and where things stand.
Yeah, it's imminent. So another great example of partnership with the county. The county executive McMahon, when I laid out the vision along with previous superintendent Jaime Alicea, I think at the time, I'm not even sure he was county executive. He might have still been chair of the legislature, but he said, this is something that stands to benefit the entire county, that we want suburban students to be able to take advantage of. And so they offered to essentially finance, participate in the financing of the project. So they're the ones that are issuing the bonds. The state is funding the project, but the county is actually constructing it. So just got an update within the past week from the county executive. The contracts, the first couple of contracts have been let and bid out. So the first work that you're going to see within weeks is going to be some exterior work, roofing and windows. So that work is going to be underway again in the coming weeks, and we remain on schedule to open up that school for 9th grade in the fall of 2025. So hopefully on my way out of City Hall, kids will be on their way into the STEAM school. And I just think about what's happening now in our community with Micron and the other investments in the new economy. We were out ahead of many other places in identifying the vision for the STEAM school. And there's a reason why when Amazon came to town, they invested over $1 million into it. When Micron came to town, they're investing upwards of $10 million into it. They see the value of making sure that our young people have the skills necessary to be competitive in their workforce. So that combined with the STEM components and how that helps us on that front, combined with the arts component and thinking about bringing the old Lincoln Theater back to life, that building is going to be just an incredible world-class facility that is going to benefit kids throughout this county.
Cool. Had a question. And first of all, let me preface this by saying I feel a little bad asking you every single detail as if you should know everything that goes on in every. So far, you're getting them all. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Brian. I try.
Question about music series in parks. Do you happen to know the dates on which band? No, I'm just kidding. But what you could share about? Let me see. The question was about specifically Hanover Thursdays evening concert series.
Yeah.
What do you care to share on that?
Yeah. So just to age myself a little bit, I go back to the old Party in the Plaza days, and so I've always enjoyed and appreciated the festivals and the different live music events that the city has had. But again, the pandemic did put a damper on a lot of that. The Hanover Thursdays are back. I think next week is the first week. They were a big success. Shout out to Joe Driscoll, former common councilor, currently our I-81 project director, who's been involved with that. So that's coming back. We have Pops in the Park, which originally was specific to Upper Onondaga Park, but we now expanded. So I think I think it's Mondays, we're down at Meacham, Tuesdays, Upper Onondaga, Wednesdays, maybe Thorndon, but we've expanded it to different parks now. And it's just live music on weeknights bring people out to the parks, weather permitting, which does tend to be a challenge at times. But yeah, I think all of that is part of us kind of coming back out of the pandemic, getting out back into the community, engaging with each other, and the arts and music is a significant quality of life component in the city, as well as an economic driver. So it's something that we're committed to. We've invested some of our ARPA funds in a festival fund to help our festivals get back going after the pandemic, and we expect to do more of that.
I know we're getting close to time. I'll ask one more question about the relationship between the city and organizations like TNT. Curious how they play a part in the budget, or just your administration in more general terms.
Yeah, so the history of the city and TNT is one that has changed quite a bit over the years. Originally, TNT was very much a part of city government, and was included in the budget and staffed by the city. Prior to this administration, TNT went through a change where they created their own nonprofit and still had an affiliation with the city. And we did continue to fund them at a certain level, and actually we've increased funding in recent years for TNT. They still do operate as a separate entity, but it's a dynamic organization. It's one that I don't think we can expect can fully represent every neighborhood interest in the city, but certainly does provide a venue and an avenue for neighborhood residents to get engaged and to engage with the city. And we've had some really great outcomes from that. One of the things that I'm really excited about that's continuing on is the City's Canvas program that we were able to fund through ARPA funds, where the TNT is administering, which is bringing murals to every TNT sector throughout the city. So that's one example of our partnership. But in terms of the relationship with the city, we do provide direct funding. We've increased that funding in recent years, and we're continuing to look at what makes the most sense in terms of the formal relationship between the city and TNT. But it is something that we remain committed to.
Very good. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you answering those questions thoroughly and honestly. Any
Sure.
Last words or closing remarks you'd like to give?
Just, I cannot overstate the theme of this presentation, next level growth. I had a meeting with somebody from the U.S. Department of Commerce yesterday, and we were talking about the Micron opportunity. And he said, what's one thing that concerns you about it? And I said, if I'm being honest, it's that I think there's a lot of folks in this town that still don't believe it's going to happen. And that worries me, because we all need to be prepared for the amount of growth that's happening. And I think certainly those that live within the city and represent the city, but also thinking about it from the perspectives of your own towns and villages, something that the county executive and I talk a lot about, is making sure that our existing neighborhoods, our existing centers, whether they be the city, town centers, villages, are in a position to maximize the investment and the benefit of this unprecedented economic investment. If left to its own devices, I could easily see Micron resulting in a lot of additional suburban sprawl, which has already been a problem in this community when we haven't been growing. We really need to be intentional about concentrating the investment in the areas where we have existing infrastructure, where we have people that are unemployed, underemployed, historically marginalized, that haven't been historically benefited from these projects. So we need to be intentional, but we just need to be ready. And I would just encourage everyone to think about it from your perspective, whether it's from where you live, where you work. This community is about to change in ways that even those of us that believe it and think about it every day can't fully comprehend. So I encourage everyone to believe and to be ready, and to work with all of us to maximize this once in a generation opportunity that we have as a community. I could not be more optimistic about the future of the city and this county, and just thrilled to see what's to come in the coming years.
That's great.
And grateful for Focus and all those that choose to invest in Focus and in this process, and all the good things happening in the community. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to everybody who joined us today. We appreciate certainly your being a friend to and supporter of Focus for many years, and appreciate in particular your time here today. So that's going to wrap up our July Focus Forum. Thanks to everybody who came. I would add that we are a small but plucky not-for-profit organization, and we offer this for free. So anybody who'd like to say thank you by visiting our website and making a small or not small donation, much obliged. But regardless, these will continue to be free and offer forums on topics of interest to the community. So with that, thank everybody. Have a good rest of the day and a great weekend.